Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member. And Chair Powell, welcome back to the committee. So I have a slightly different perspective than Senator Kennedy does on this question of inflation and debt. You know, I don't think that discretionary spending is the problem when it comes to our federal budget. If you look at it, military and non-defense discretionary spending has hovered at about 3% of GDP for the last 30 years. And in fact, discretionary spending has decreased over the last 30 years. So clearly, that is not the problem with what's going on with our debt. It's not what's driving debt growth. The big change is in revenues. So the national debt has increased to nearly 100% of GDP because of the Bush and the Trump tax cuts. And without those tax cuts, in other words, if we'd left our tax levels at roughly what they were in the Clinton administration, I mean, which in no way restrained economic growth, the budget would only have been significantly out of balance during the Great Recession and during COVID. So, Chair Powell, I'm not going to ask you to comment on that because I know you don't like to comment on fiscal policy, but I feel that that's important context for the committee to have as we think about what is driving inflation and what we are doing about it. I have been really struck by how remarkably resilient the labor market has been over the last 16 months or so, which is a good thing as we do the work we want to do to grow the middle class and create more opportunity and more financial security for people. And so rates have risen 10 times, yet unemployment is still near historic lows, and wages are growing. Now, as you and others have pointed out, real wage growth has been clearly impacted by inflation, which is a real challenge for especially middle-class families, working families. Although I believe, as you said, Chair Powell, let me just check this, that real wage growth has ticked up in the last couple of months. Is that right? Do I have that right?
So at the beginning, it was positive real wage growth only at the bottom of the income spectrum. I believe now on a 12-month basis that overall wages are moving up faster than inflation.
Right.
Just recently.
Right. And so, I mean, I think, clearly we're not there yet. Clearly we have more work to do. I'm encouraged by the progress we've made so far. And I also just want to point out that the significant investments that we have been making in domestic manufacturing and bringing supply chains home and supporting prevailing wage jobs, I think are an important part of this success story, this economic success story, not mitigating the impact and the need to continue to bring inflation back down. So, Chair Powell, my question for you is, you said last week and you're saying today that while the labor market remains tight, you're seeing signs that labor supply and demand are falling back into sync. Do you see a path for inflation to continue slowing without us seeing significant job losses and doing harm to middle-class families, working families?
I do continue to see that path, and you're right. It is the labor market is really the strength of the economy. It's what's driving the economy. It's very, very strong demand for workers, and workers are getting jobs and they're getting paid and they're spending money, and that's driving demand and the whole thing. But it's gradually cooling, and that's what we would want to see. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a path, and ideally the means by which demand and supply get back into alignment will involve things like the job openings rate coming down as opposed to the unemployment rate going up. Mm-hmm. Although if you look at our forecasts, it's not a desired objective, but we do expect on this path that the unemployment rate will go up a little further because it is historically low, even at 3.7%. Until the last few years, we really haven't seen that for 50 years. Mm-hmm. So we do think it'll come up a little bit, but ideally, most of the loosening will come in the form of other ways. Right,
and so to the extent that we're able to pursue policies that strengthen the labor market, that contribute to the resiliency of the labor market, it seems as if that should help to mitigate the negative impacts on the labor market that rising rates would have, because in effect what rising rates do is it slows growth and potentially leads to layoffs.
So our part of it is to try to get inflation under control, and that's what we're doing. And ideally, we'll do that with with as little as possible, damage to the economy and the labor market.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Senator Smith. Senator Tillis of North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr.